a whole variety of data-driven decisions are made. Everything from where we're going to put federal dollars, on the state, on the municipal, on the county level, to how much our votes are worth by the way that our electoral districts are drawn, to infrastructure decisions, who adds a bus on this line, and who takes away a bus on that line. So this will affect us in almost every way for the next 10 years. And because our communities are hard to count, we're underrepresented in these data-driven decisions when they are being made. And as we all may or may not know, there are a lot of forces at work trying to reduce our ability to get ourselves counted in this way. So please don't let yourself, go uncounted. The easiest way you can contribute, to your community for the next 10 years is just to make sure that there's a proof of you being there. So you can go to my2020census.gov. It takes about 5 minutes, maybe 10 minutes if you have a big family, and you can just submit it online. Then you don't have to worry about any enumerators showing up in a couple months and surprising you with a knock at the door. So with that being said, we can get started. We're going to do a brief, panel discussion moderated by Brother Sufyan, and then a quick Q&A form at the end, and then some closing remarks and announcements. So if you're watching this on Zoom, feel free to drop any questions you may have in the Q&A box. And if you're watching this on Facebook Live, leave a comment, leave some questions, and hopefully we'll have enough time to get to it by the end of the discussion. So just to introduce our panelists, we have Brother Sufyan from CAIR-Chicago. I learned about Sufyan today. He's the Deputy Director and Counsel at CAIR-Chicago, but he also serves on the board of directors for ACLU and Chicago Legal Clinic, CAN-TV. They do great work there. And is also a volunteer as a children's hospital musician with Open Heart Magic. So with that being said, inshallah, I'd like to turn it over to Sufyan, where he can introduce tonight's other panelists.
Great. Assalamu alaikum and good evening. Thank you so much for the Coalition CAIR-Chicago for having us all here tonight. As Waleed says, I am a hospital magician, but unfortunately for the last several months, I haven't been able to do any magic. So I've just been missing a little void in my life. I'm really lucky and grateful today. I have two amazing individuals that we can learn from and have an excellent conversation with. I have Andy Kang and Ruth Lopez McCarthy. Andy Kang's the Executive Director of Advancing Justice Chicago. He was the lead negotiator for the Illinois Trust Act and co-led efforts to bring automatic voter registration to Illinois. He's also a board member of the Illinois Coalition for Immigrant and Refugee Rights, co-chair of the National Association of Pacific American Bar Association's Immigration Committee, and co-chair of Forefront's Policy Committee. I stole these things just off your respective websites, so just wanted to give you a heads up. Ruth Lopez McCarthy is the managing director at the National Immigrant Justice Center and oversees their Legal Protection Fund project. She's an expert on immigration and asylum law and policy, and has worked tirelessly to protect the rights of our immigrant community, including our undocumented communities. Over the past several years, she has been a key leader in the City of Chicago's Chicago With You Task Force, informing government leaders, educators, and community organizations of the constantly evolving landscape of our nation's immigration policy and the resources available to those in Chicago, greater Chicago area, the awesome community organizations on the ground here. They're both dear friends, community partners, both Chicago heroes of mine, and it's just such a delight to have them both here. We're living in a strange time, right? We're dealing with COVID. We had the murder of George Floyd, and I know from a personal perspective, I'm seeing conversations happen with families, with allies, with community members that have never really had to happen before. I think both because I was scared to have them, but also not to ruffle any unnecessary feathers. But recently I've been watching Indian matchmaking on Netflix, and it's been triggering in many aspects. One, because a lot of what's said on the show is comments I've heard throughout my adult life from family and family friends, like you're too picky, et cetera, et cetera. But there's huge issues of sexism, casteism, and colorism, which are so blatant in that culture and explained in all of these desires of what these individuals are looking for and potential matches, and realizing that so much racism is an inherent part of many of our cultures. So hopefully today we can delve deeper into some of these topics, and I'm excited. So, Andy, I will start with you. So great to see you. Please just share a little bit about yourself and advancing justice and just your work. We'd love to hear about it.
Sure. Thank you, Sufyan, for having me. Thank you to CAIR-Chicago, as well as the Illinois Muslim Civic Coalition for hosting this event. As Sufyan mentioned, I'm a Midwestern boy as well. I was born and raised out in the northwest suburbs, grew up in the Palatine area my entire life. For more than a few years, I worked down in Springfield as an attorney drafting legislation, and found my way to Asian Americans Advancing Justice. Some of you that have been around in the community here in Chicagoland for over a decade know that our organization used to be called the Asian American Institute. And so a lot of our work is focused on marginalized members of the different Asian American communities in Chicagoland, but also in Illinois. We find ourselves, certainly since Donald Trump has been president, in a reactive mode mostly, right? Responding to one crisis after another. I think with the pandemic, things have become that much more heightened and critical because, we're seeing so much suffering. We're seeing people having such limited options about where they can get help and assistance and being protected, of all the other threats that existed from 2016 up till now. Those are only exacerbated, unfortunately, because of COVID-19. And I'd say that the last thing I'll say that, and we can come back to it, is because I've been talking to you, Sufyan, and folks in particular in the South Asian and the Muslim community in Chicago about is the rise of scapegoating for COVID, right? We're seeing a lot of intense rhetoric from the Trump administration between them and China, right? The Chinese government about blaming around who's responsible for this pandemic. Putting aside geopolitics and any looming Cold War, I think one thing we know from the post 9/11 experience is how dangerous that kind of political rhetoric is, not just in an election year, but in a year where there's so much economic loss. People are losing jobs and businesses, but they're also loss of life. People are losing loved ones, and there's so much bad information out there. I think we know that it's inevitable that we're seeing a spike in hate incidents. We know that based on historical patterns, it's likely to continue to get worse, even a year, 2 years, maybe even for the next decade. And so, that's something that we're always aware of, but I think it's become a much higher priority. That's something we just have to address more fully. And I think we're seeing multiple communities getting targeted in different ways in this moment. So, look forward to talking more about that. But thank you for having me.
Thank you. And we'll definitely get back to the conversation of scapegoating. And I know Ruth probably has a lot that she can offer on that aspect as well. But Ruth, please share a little bit about yourself and NIJC.
Yeah, thank you so much, Sufyan, and as well, Illinois Muslim Civic Coalition and CAIR for hosting me today. As Sufyan mentioned, I am a Chicagoan, born and raised, very proud Northwest Sider, and have been involved in the immigrants' rights movement since I graduated from college, pre-college even, and really focused some of my time doing national work in DC to push comprehensive immigration reform. If you could remember that there was a time when we did that, when we worked on that. And then back here to Chicago to work with the Illinois Coalition of Immigrant and Refugee Rights, on some implementation work. And, you know, most recently I've worked at the NIJC, the National Immigrant Justice Coalition, as an attorney overseeing our legal protection fund work there for the past, now going on 4 years. So it's been, you know, I've kind of done a little bit of everything as it pertains to the immigration world, some organizing, some advocacy, you know, lawyering. And, you know, I think what I can tell you personally is this is the hardest period that I've had to go through in my, you know, many years of doing this work. And, you know, and it's organizations like NIJC that I think right now are so necessary and so relevant in helping communities and helping our immigrant population through this very, very, very confusing legal time, right? There's, you know, at NIJC, we help at least at minimum 10,000 immigrants a year with direct services. You know, those are cases that we file. We have LGBT, we have different focus areas. We have LGBTQ group, we have children, a kids group, we have an asylum team, we have a detention team. We have, you know, a general immigration support team. All of our clients are 200% or below the federal poverty line. And we are so busy, right? The work that we do is, you could multiply, you know, us by so many, and then there's still more and more to do. And, you know, what I think is one of the things to talk about, right? You still talk about scapegoating, right? This administration has used not only immigrants, but the process that they've used immigrants to scapegoat, as well as a way to make the process harder. So not just the conversation about them and the banning, but, you know, even on the back end, things that you're not seeing that we see as practitioners, they're just making it hard and very difficult for us to do our jobs and to be able to advocate for our clients the way that, you know, we are meant to. And it feels very purposeful to some degree that that this is happening in the way that it is, the dismantling of asylum, you know, DACA, as we just saw what happened yesterday. So, you know, NIJC is an organization here to kind of help guide our community with the insight on immigration law and what's happening, and, you know, through their cases in this very, very difficult and scary times. It's a wonderful place to be. And, you know, I hope that we can continue to work in coalition like this to bring awareness to all these issues. So thank you for having me here today, and you know, look forward to talking about these important issues, because there's so much from a practitioner side that I can share with you that people don't see on the outside that really fall into, you know, all of these different buckets.
So saying that, can you go ahead? I think to share with the viewers what the Legal Protection Fund is and what you're seeing in terms of the practitioner side. If, you know, after President Trump was elected, City of Chicago created this fund, right? So what have you been doing with that? And then how has that evolved now since the last couple months with COVID?
Yeah. So yeah, thank you. The Legal Protection Fund program is just a subset of one of the programs we run at NIJC. And it started right after with the Emanuel administration. And the idea here is that we have a fund that is legal services and community organizations, right? We work together with 11 community-based organizations to help provide know your rights presentations and general immigration kind of support through documentation support, through kind of knowledge, and really making sure that it's community-based, right? So these community-based organizations have community navigators who train, who then go out and get people. Those clients then can be referred directly to NIJC, right? And as well, any Chicago resident who comes through NIJC's doors benefits from the Legal Protection Fund, right? So every year, our goals have been 1,500 legal screenings in 1,000 cases. And every year we've surpassed our goals of how many cases and clients we see. You know, as it goes on, our services are needed, and, you know, we continue to add cases to everything that we have, right? So in the beginning of this year, I'll tell you, the first 2 months of the year, we had already had about 300 intakes. So that's saying we saw at least 150 clients in 1 month, right? Each month. Then COVID hit, right? And we had to shut down. And we had to figure out how we were going to start our intake, how we were going to be able to serve the community the way that we had before. Because all of our appointments were face-to-face. All of our clients, we develop a relationship. We really, connect with them, and we really need to. A lot of our clients have gone through very traumatic experiences, and being, having an attorney that can understand and speak with them directly is very important for the work we do. So, we were going 150 cases a month. We had to switch over, and that hindered us. We were only able to do even half that many, and we still, every day that we open up our lines for new appointments, they're filled right away. So, from where we could go to, and I'm just talking about the Legal Protection Fund program. This is not even, the rest of NIJC's program. This is just LPF. We were going from 150 intakes a month to, 60, 80, something completely, and that's just because of capacity and how we just can't, have as many people doing telephonic intakes and then doing our check-in and just the system that we have. So, the need is still there. And if anything, I'd say the need has increased, right? With so much confusion around DACA, so much confusion just around all of the different executive orders and memos and, threats that you see here, and, academy is happening. So many things that are going that it's very difficult. The people are scared and want that help. And, this pandemic has allowed us to change our services. So we do it telephonically, but, unfortunately, it can't just be at the level that it used to be in terms of volume, which is difficult.
Thank you so much for sharing. I think there's a big misconception out there that, because everyone's stuck at home, there's less things happening, there's less need for all these services, but these policies are still in place. These people's immigration check-ins, their green card status hearings, they're happening, and these people definitely need. One thing we're seeing at CAIR-Chicago is while there's not as many international flights coming back to the United States just because travel is restricted, we had a lot of Americans go to those countries where their family was banned from coming in. But now due to COVID, they're stuck there and there's no flights to come back. And some of those countries like Yemen are amidst civil war and famine, and they're just desperately trying to get out there. And there's over 1,000 Americans that are there. But what shocks me is no major media has even talking about things like that. No major media is talking about how people on the ground, outside of the economic uncertainty with COVID and schools and things like that, but how these things which were a problem before COVID are still a problem right now. And that's a little scary.
Well, and I think that speaks to your scapegoating question, right? That they're able to kind of now shut down the consulates for indefinite amounts of time and just be like, oh, it's COVID. When we knew that they were slow processing a lot of different things, and the new public charge rule that that had taken into effect. So it definitely impacts all of us in different ways that we don't even know. I think I see.
Definitely. Andy, I want to go back to your scapegoating comment. I know we've talked a lot about the rise of hate and the similarities that we've seen post 9/11 towards the Muslim community, and now with the rise of COVID against the Asian community. Talk about what you're seeing on the ground a little bit about that.
Yeah, so, with the exception of maybe 1 or 2 weeks where the president backed off some of his rhetoric, he's now recommitted to, calling it the China virus, blaming China for the pandemic, all those things. I think one thing that maybe makes this particular situation potentially even more dangerous or slightly different than even post 9/11 is it appears that a lot of white hate groups are much more organized than they were back then, than they were a decade ago, based on what I'm reading and seeing. And this is not just in response to the pandemic, but a lot of the Black Lives Matter protests have attracted a lot of white hate groups that are very organized. Some of them, in a very disturbing fashion, are incredibly well armed, right? And they're showing up, right? And at the same time, we do have administration that we just saw the story in Portland is ramping up and escalating on their side too with law enforcement, right? And so with all this instability and the rhetoric, I think you're finding a lot of opportunities here for different communities to get singled out. And if there is a silver lining here is, I think for those organized groups or political leaders that are trying to scapegoat so many groups at the same time, I think it has allowed many communities of color or different marginalized communities to recognize, like, oh, this is the same thing that is being done. And that for those of some of us that do this work full time, that may seem obvious, but I think for most folks in a pre-pandemic world, you mostly notice when your community is getting picked on, right? You may notice when some other community is getting picked on and say, oh, that's bad, but you have your day-to-day life. But it's so much easier, I hope, and I'm seeing a lot of encouraging signs, to build solidarity when you're upset about what's happening in your community and you're seeing all these patterns, the same pattern play out for so many other places. And my hope is that not just that we'll respond in an organized way and, pushing back against that. And we've seen a lot of that around the nation. But when things, quote unquote, get back to normal, if and when we eventually get a vaccine, and if and when people are totally supportive of the teachers union, but once folks are able to send their kids back to school, and potentially even when we have a different resident in the White House, that may or may not occur, that people not just try to put this in their back, rear view mirror and forget about the fact that this threat is always there, right? That at any given time, any one of our communities, whether it's the Latinx community, whether it's refugees, whether it's the Muslim community, whether it's East Asians, or our Black brothers and sisters and folks that are fighting so hard right now for a justice they have never really fully experienced in this country, that we wouldn't forget these lessons and these insights that we're having right now at this chaotic moment.
Thank you for sharing that. Would you say there's been any direct impact to the communities here in Chicago? Like, has Chinatown seen any economic impact, or are there what's the fear level in communities now that we're 4 months into COVID quarantine?
Yeah, I mean, I think you have seen recently Chinatown open up some of their businesses, for example, outdoors. But certainly in a lot of communities, they've been hurt pretty badly about the just in general around the pandemic and not being able to do business. But I think there is a lot of fear that we're seeing, especially online with our seniors, about being concerned about getting singled out, right? Because the sad reality of our internet connected world these days is, you can have a hate incident that happened in Texas to a Southeast Asian person or family. It might as well have happened here, right? Because people see it, they see the video, they read about it, they hear it from their families and relatives. And that has real ripple effects for all of us, in particular when you feel like maybe not all government entities have your best interests at stake, right? We know that, for example, Ruth's organization, NIJC, is constantly pushing back against all the different things that ICE does in Chicagoland, right? We just recently saw that, the town of Dwight, their city government is trying to enter a private detention facility contract, right, with ICE, with the federal government, despite the fact that we passed the Illinois Trust Act to forbid that exact, and the Moratorium Act, to try to prevent those exact types of things. And so when you have law enforcement officials that are politicizing their job, right, and embracing the targeting and scapegoating, I think it's understandable that there's a lot of fear about what exactly, what protections exactly exist for folks in this moment. And so, it's a tough place for us to be, because hate crime incidents, we certainly want people feeling safe, but we also know not everyone feels safe turning to law enforcement.
No, definitely. And what you said about us living in such a connected world, not only do victims see what's happening to other people, but I think potential perpetrators are also seeing what others are doing and maybe being inspired by some of those actors to take action themselves. And I think that's just as scary what we're seeing. I want to shift a little bit and go on to racism. So a lot of the communities, I mean, not a lot, the communities we work with have all experienced extreme racism, especially in the last several years under the Trump administration, through policies, through inaction. I know it's a broad, very open question, but describe some of that, because I don't think, one of the things is, I feel sometimes communities live isolated. We see what my community's facing. I know what the Muslim experience is, but oftentimes we don't know what our neighbors are experiencing in their own identity. So I would love to hear the types of racism, the types of that. And then after that, we can shift more to the types of racism we see within our own communities. But first, let's talk about how we're experiencing it ourselves. And Ruth, if you could start, please.
Oh, okay. So within, there's a lot there. So just to clarify, within kind of the immigration community and how.
Yeah, definitely.
Well, I would say our whole system is based on, white supremacy and structural racism and, quotas and, keeping certain people out and allowing certain people in, right? And if you do just some history on what immigration is and when it started, right? You'll see, right? Who wrote these laws, right? It was the white men in power, and they continue to be the ones who are writing these laws, right? Not much has changed from the beginning, and they continue to be writing laws that that hurt our communities rather than help them, right? Where a vision of America, it was one built on immigrants, right? Built by immigrants, this land of the free, home of the brave, right? That's not what we're seeing anymore. It's what my perception of it, and what I feel through certain acts, like when we started out, right? The way that this administration started, with the way this president started his call to the presidency by disparaging Latinos and calling for a border wall, and then from some of the first days in office to enacting travel bans, right? Specifically saying we're keeping certain people out and people from certain countries out, right? I mean, it's not much, it's that explicit, right? And it was passed multiple times because of the challenges, right? We're on 3 right now, maybe more. We think about asylum, right? And everything that this administration has done to dismantle our asylum system, right? This idea that third country priorities, the people waiting at the border, what we thought was asylum no longer exists in the way that it has in the past. And that is meant to keep people out, right? You hear this from the president when he calls, countries in Africa, by disparaging names, using expletives to describe them, and comments that they want people from Switzerland, right? That why don't we have more people from, these white European countries immigrating? Those are comments that have been said. I think, just right there shows you how this immigration system is unjust, is racial, is racist, and really needs to change in its practice and in its purpose.
Thank you. Andy, I'd love to hear your thoughts.
Yeah, this is a big one.
Sorry.
I love the fact, Ruth, well, just so long as we don't have to solve it tonight. I love the fact that Ruth started with white supremacy, because when I think about, whether it's immigration or, let's say, policing, because that's such a big topic right now of discussion, at its heart, what we really need folks to fully appreciate is that white supremacy is at the heart of both problems, right? Ruth, we'll start with immigration. you know, our immigration system has never been about fairness or creating the best possible society possible. It was always about power and race, right? When you know, one of the stories that was a mind-blowing story for me to learn is in history was when Hitler rose to power in Germany. His Nazi lawyers, when they were trying to come up with new laws that they would like to pass to implement their, you know, their very dark, evil way of thinking, they actually traveled to the US and studied our immigration laws and studied our citizenship laws and studied the way that we handled racial matters with our legal system. And so you know, I don't know about you, but when I learned that, my mind was blown, because what that shows is this has always existed with our country from the beginning. And, you know, I'm not here to say, oh, the founders are bad or good or things like that. They were, you know, they were sinful men with their own flaws, right? But it's important for us to just recognize that our immigration system has always been rooted in racism. And so for us to create something new, something that's actually going to work for everyone, that's going to be humane and really put forward a vision that isn't rooted in racism, we have to start asking the right questions. And I would argue that the same thing applies to our policing, right? If the issue is law enforcement, meaning locking people up for breaking a law, whether we agree with it or not, say legalization of cannabis or not, right? Is a different question than, is that the best system for public safety, right? Do we need to lock up 2 million individuals, mostly Black and brown men, in order to actually have a safe society? I think, you know, the verdict is in, right? That after decades of trying the incarceration model, that we're not safer, right? And we're hearing and seeing now, in particular from the Black community and so many communities of color, that they don't feel safe with the system. They haven't for decades, perhaps as long as policing has existed. And so if it's not working, let's ask better questions about what is actually going to make us safe. And let's just all recognize that white supremacy at the heart of both of these institutions is something that we're going to have to really recognize and address if we want to create something better.
Thank you. Heavy question, so thank you for your thoughts on that. Again, I'm going to shift to racism by our own communities, and something I've been working on and thinking about a lot recently. Even like I'd gone to dinner with a friend a couple of years ago, and she asked where I live, and I said South Loop, and she used a derogatory name in Urdu referring to Black people, and she's like, "Isn't that where they live?" Right? And my jaw just dropped. And then paying attention to a family members and how others I interact with, how they refer to people of other, not necessarily only Black people, but Latinos or other Asians, or and just being blinded by it a little bit, just being so immune to some of those comments, and now just being a lot more aware of how racist they actually are and how it's just a cultural that they're born with. And then also thinking about how it's almost based on, like, even though my family is Muslim, but almost based on caste system of like, we are superior to others based on the color of our skin, based on the regions we're from, based on, and I see it sometimes even within the Muslim community, based on how close they are to the Saudi Arabia, and you know, whether they're Sunni or Shia, and it all comes back to this: we are better than you. And I don't know necessarily if it's due to imperialistic influences. I don't know if it's due to just people are terrible and they always want to see who's better than the other. But I struggle with it a lot because it's everywhere, and it's hard to, it's at a point where like I have to avoid certain conversations with family and extended family just because I don't want to have to keep being like, stop, you can't say that, stop, you can't say that, stop, you can't say that, without them ever changing, right? And making me wonder, like, do I just stop interacting with these people because it's driving me crazy that they're not willing to think and change and adapt. So what are you seeing in, whether it be the broader immigrant community, Latino community, Asian community? You both can chat. I'd love for us to converse about this. So please share your thoughts.
I'll start. I think what we're seeing is an opportunity for a lot of younger, a period for younger leaders to step up, right? I think both in the Latino, Latinx community, we're seeing it. In the immigration movement, we're seeing it. It's a time for those, the young ones to come up and say, you're doing it wrong. And you are wrong. And this is how we create a more just society. I mean, there's some of these young organizers where I'm like, wow, like you're teaching me right now so much about, you know, just how to do this now. What's changed? This new landscape. TikTok? I don't know what, right? So I think what you're seeing is this opportunity, this moment for a young generation to finally to say, like, you know, no, we don't care for your labels and for, you know, your racism and for your bigotry, and we're going to change it. And I'm so incredibly proud to live through this moment, to be able to see that, right? I can really get upset by a lot of the world and what's happening. But then I look around, you know, I live in Oak Park right now, and there's a group of students here at the high school who, you know, are holding rallies and, you know, are saying this is enough, this is what we need, making demands on their high schools, you know, making marches and saying, you know, removing racist pictures from middle schools, like really moving forward needles that, you know, adults haven't done. And I really, that's, you know, that's what I'm seeing right now. And that's what I'm choosing to kind of hold on to move forward and to think, you know, that we will get through this, right? And it will take a long time, and there will be a lot of questions and a lot of uncomfortable times. I'm having them with my own family, you know, but it's that being persistent in who you are and showing up with sometimes grace, kindness, and sometimes with, you know, the real passion that you feel, right? And just always kind of being consistent in your messaging, I think, for me, and really seeing and taking pride in this young generation of leaders that just are blowing my mind. It's really great.
Are you seeing the racism in different ways than you may have seen before?
Yeah, I think for myself personally, I'm opening my eyes a little bit more to words, right? I'm Latinx, certain ways and certain phrases that, you know, I've grown up using, thinking, oh wait, hold on a second, like that has not, you know, that's not a cute phrase to say. That's not how you should address somebody in that manner. You know, I think, you know, in movies and just different ways of picking certain things up. Like I'm reflecting a lot on my own childhood, right? And how I didn't have these words, these microaggressions, and, you know, certain context of race that we speak of now, and thinking about, you know, how was it pervasive always then, but you just didn't see it, right? So I've opened my own eyes to a lot of different issues of race and things that were subtle that, you know, that were subtle that are now glaring to me that this is wrong.
Thank you. Andy.
You know, in particular, I think in different Asian communities, there's racism towards other Asian ethnicities. Obviously, there's a lot of history in Asia between different groups that go back centuries sometimes, right? But then there's also here in America a lot of anti-Blackness, right? In particular, in different Asian communities. And, you know, I'd agree with Ruth. I think for younger folks, it's easier to make that distinction between, there's one thing to have pride in your ethnicity or in your ancestry and your culture, and having to maintain that sense of pride or self-esteem by having some false notion of supremacy, right? And looking down on other groups. And I think probably the most effective way that we're gonna win over maybe the not so young generations that we need to start to be convinced that they should see things in a new light is around history. Many, I grew up in a household where history of my people was such a big deal for my dad in particular. And I found it always interesting. He went to college in Jim Crow South, was allowed to use white facilities, which is a fascinating story on its own, but unfortunately did absorb a lot of the anti-Blackness of his fellow students, right? And I would have these ongoing conversations with him. He has since passed away, but at the end, I did find it remarkable that it was only after I started connecting the history of, that he knew back in his home country, original country, and the history of the United States and draw parallels, that he even really started to understand why race relations or his own perceptions of race were a particular way. In his last year of life, I remember we were watching CNN and Donald Trump was on the TV and he looked at me and said, "What is Donald Trump's problem with Black people?" And I was like, "What?" And I jokingly told him, like, "You have a problem with Black people." That, like, do you not recall the millions of conversations we've had? And I do think it takes a long time for folks to understand and connect the different histories of different peoples and see those similarities. And I think that's one of the reasons why, we've this year launched an effort to bring Asian American history to our public schools here in Illinois, because we think it's really important for not just the Asian American community, but for other communities to know what our story has been over the centuries in this country, not just overseas, but what has happened to different Asian communities when they immigrated here. Because we feel like that's a missing piece of the story, that every immigrant community comes here and your story begins only with you and your family once you got here. But it's really important to have that context of how our communities have been impacted and oftentimes benefited by the progress made by other communities, right? And so I think as we move in that direction, I'm more optimistic that we won't just get the young people that happen to stumble into ethnic studies or a great class, but we'll start getting some of the older folks from the older generation as well to start shifting on these.
You both are jumping to the positives too quickly right now.
I would also say here, so I think, and I think somebody mentioned it earlier, right? That this is a time where people are seeing their connections, not just in their history, but in their oppression, right? That this country, that run very similar parallels to each other and how they've been used and oppressed, and sometimes that can bring people together and understanding that. Each other are not I want to say the enemy, but are not the ones at fault for what's happening, but, it's the larger system. So, in some, I would say I'm seeing that also happen, right? That people can find a way and are realizing that, oh wait, it's not, you're not taking my job. That's not what's happening here. What's happening here is that, the employer is putting us against each other and this doesn't work for anyone, and really creating a union to see, how this disparity has existed and affected everybody and, benefited one.
Where do you think these sentiments of anti-Blackness came from in our communities though, right? Like, I would think, we often talk about like Asians being the model minority and, and that having a double-edged sword sometimes of both being like great, but also resentment in that. I'm one to think that we should all of us who are suffering should stand together, but that's not always the case. So where do you think is the roots of that, and why do you think it's still so persistent?
Yeah, I mean, I can only speak with strong knowledge specifically about the Korean community, but
please, yeah.
But it may also be applicable to other communities. But I think, first of all, Korea is a very homogenous country. It wasn't called the Hermit Kingdom by accident, right? It was very isolated, very insular, even among other Asian nations, right? And so I think for Korean immigrants coming to this country, dealing with diversity was a new thing, right? And so not always knowing how to navigate that space. But I think the more overriding thing that I think I've gotten some consensus with a lot of Korean Americans, my generation, that talk about this is the survivor instinct of our immigrant community. Means you don't come into America trying to change America, right? You're not trying to like create a better America. You're trying to survive. You're trying to get your foothold. You want to create opportunities for your children, and so it's like, what are the rules of this system, right? And I think we've established the rules of this American system as white supremacy, right? And a country that was founded and has prospered by and large because of slavery, right? And anti-Blackness. And so if you were like, who are we going to be like in this system? Who do we aspire to be like in this system? And you look at who's doing quite well in this society and who's not doing quite well. And then you just make a choice about who you're going to associate with and who you're not. So while it's not a strict caste system, say the way that folks in India would identify with, where there's castes that you really try to stay at arm's length away, there's some truth to that approach when you're in a survivor mentality. And I don't know that, my second generation, that we have necessarily freed ourselves and liberated ourselves from that mindset. I think many of us second-gen immigrants still have a little bit of that survivor instinct in us because it's been hammered so hard by our parents' generation. And so, if I had to guess, that my best sense is, in particular with the Korean American community, that's where you find a lot of the anti-Blackness. Certainly the riots in LA created, in some pockets, another opportunity for anti-Blackness to flourish. It went the other way for other communities, but that would be one example that I think, I think there are some common lessons there. But Ruth, I'd love to hear what your thoughts on this.
Okay, remind me the questions just so that I have my thoughts.
You can say whatever you want. It's the rise of where did this rise of anti-Blackness come from?
Well, I mean, I think, and again, I can only speak to the Latinx community and in my experience that I know, right? No. But I mean, I think it's always been there in our community, right? We were conquered by Europeans as well. Spaniards, came over and conquered South America and Central Mexico. So, the colorism has existed, right? There's a lot of indigenous, also indigenous racism that exists in especially in like Latin American countries. But the colorism has been there. The racism to Black Latinos has always been there. And I think it's a little to some of what Andy says as well, right? This idea of survivorship coming here, you made it, being able like to so easily others, right, in this country to say, oh, wait, look, they're not doing well, they're doing better. That's, you strive to be, smart and good in school and be like this, by like others, that kind of immigrant mentality. And I think it's sad, and we haven't, we have leaders, we have Black immigrant leaders, and we need to lift up those voices and learn about our own history, right? And what the Black immigrant history looks like here in this country, because, Black people didn't come here freely, right? And so they, were some of the forced immigrants, right? And labor, and we just learning more about what that history is in the United States, I think will help all of us dismantle, right, this racism, but it does exist. I don't know why it exists. All I can say, I think when I think back about it, I think I can think about this colorism that's so pervasive, right? Don't get brown, don't get too dark outside in the sun, all these skin lighteners, but from my I think it's again the conquering, the European conquistadores that came and brought that same mentality of we're better than you and we're white and that makes us better.
Thank you. Andy, I feel what you said about the riots in LA, I heard a lot of those similar comments after the first day of George Floyd protests. There was a lot of vandalism here. Like, why are they doing this? Why, look, this is bad. They shouldn't be doing this. Ruth, I want to go back to something you said when we last spoke about how those in power use race to separate us, kind of like what happened in parts of the city during the protests. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, I mean, I think, right. So some things that we saw in the city, at least one of the things that happened, not in the city and in the suburbs, was there were big clashes in Berwyn and in Cicero out here in predominantly Latino communities against Black people. And it was difficult. One of the reports that came out were that the police were letting this happen, that they were just kind of there saying, okay, kind of like let it happen. And, that's wrong. Another way that the police do this and perpetuate this is through this gang database, right? They continue to put Latinos and minorities, Black, brown community members on these gang databases and use that power to, pit people against each other. And they yeah, I mean, you see it happening with our administration right now saying, the Latinos are coming, Mexicans are coming to take your jobs, right? This is what's going to happen. And it's an old tactic that it happens and that gets used a lot. We're seeing it again. We can't fall prey to it, and we have to hold everybody accountable.
Great. I have a couple. I'm going to come back to then like some of the positives and action items near the end of our conversation, but we started to get some questions from those viewing, which I want to segue to. And for those viewing, please keep asking the questions and I will incorporate them as we can for the remainder time that we have. The first question for both of you is, how far can the administration go in violating the Illinois Trust Act? And then what more can we do as communities if federal agents keep spilling into our city and circumventing state law?
Well, Ruth, I believe you all are contemplating litigation here, so maybe I don't know if you want to text, some of your colleagues there, but
I think we, at least, what I fall back on as an attorney is that we do have some laws that we need to continue to follow and hold people accountable, and we have a system that we have to continue to support, right? A constitution and laws that hopefully will allow us to point out these bad acts and regulate, right, our own government. It's so hard to, it's kind of weird to even be saying these things. Honestly, I don't think I ever really kind of contemplated what this looked like, and shame on me, right? Because this has always been a possibility, but we look to litigation and we look to continue to fight and use the law and our interpretation of what's right.
Yeah, I have to confess to you, Sufyan, when I was in Springfield with NIJC and ICER and other allies that were working on these bills, I can't say I predicted that we would have government officials that just don't care what the law says, right? That's a really hard scenario, and I think that's where we are a 501c3, we're a nonpartisan organization, but I do think that that's where voters who hopefully do care about whether government officials are respecting democratically passed laws that the community has come together in support of, whether they are living up to their responsibilities or not, and whether they're going to hold those individuals accountable, right? And so while I hope the litigation is successful, I do think that it's important that folks know that there are consequences for this, right? So I don't know if and when those officials are up for election, but you know, that would be my hope, is that that would factor in.
We hope.
Yeah, yeah.
So what are ways, I know both of you mentioned this a little bit, but what are ways and actions that we can do to address racism within ourselves? So I love, Ruth, what you said is follow the young people, and I totally echo that and agree. But do you have any other insights of what communities collectively and individually can do to combat racism and be stronger allies, especially to the Black community right now?
Yeah, I mean, I can go real quickly because it's something that I know CAIR-Chicago and Advancing Justice are looking at. Our hope is we can get it out and start this project this fall is around training community members, whether they are Asian American or Muslim or some, you know, identify in another way, with basic tools about things they can do if they're out in community and they see, you know, a hate incident, or they see someone getting verbally harassed or targeted in a way that, you know, your spidey sense kind of goes off. You know, something's not right here, right? That someone is getting heckled or being made to feel unsafe or uncomfortable. There are things you can do without putting yourself directly in harm's way that can help de-escalate the situation. And so, you know, we're looking at a training right now that we're hoping to bring locally. Obviously, it will be virtual for the foreseeable future, but that's something we hope that individuals would participate in, would volunteer to, and then help spread the word. Because I think the more folks that are willing to be bystanders for anybody who's getting singled out because of an ism or because of the climate we're living in, that you would do your little part to maybe try to diffuse the situation and save someone, you know, from feeling alone when they're being faced with something that's could be quite a traumatic experience. So, you know, for me, in my faith heritage, it's the Good Samaritan, right? Like being a Good Samaritan means taking some kind of action, right, on behalf of someone that you don't necessarily identify with, share that common identity, but that's something that I'm very excited about. I'm looking forward to us getting that going, and you know, we'll be sure to share that with all of you as soon as we're ready to go.
Thank you. Ruth?
I know some of the things that NIJC is doing directly is really a lot of work around defunding hate, right? Defunding immigration detention, right? That really cross paths, right, with our criminal justice reform system, really thinking about that, right? We know that our Black immigrants are doubly harmed in the system, right? They a lot of times it doesn't matter that they're immigrants or that they're African or they're Nigerian, you know, they come from another country. In a lot of individuals' eyes, they're Black, right? So they are fall prey to that, and the over policing that happens in our minority communities, right? So, you know, NIJC is doing a lot around defunding hate, really thinking about defunding detention, immigration, and that crossing over to, you know, what this means to our criminal justice system, really taking resources and putting it back into our communities for our, you know, mental health resources. And so, you know, we're working on campaigns and coalitions across Illinois, right, to move that forward. So we encourage everybody to look in and see how is it that they can get involved in that work, right? That defund hate work. How do we bring about more resources to our communities that we know, mental health resources that we know are so needed in our area. And yeah, you know, I think one of the things I'm doing personally is really looking to Black immigrant leaders as to what should happen in this movement. So, you know, not just the young generation coming up, but who are our Black immigrant leaders. They're out there and they haven't had the voice that they need to have at the table and a seat at the table. And now is the time. And however, you know, I can facilitate or help or just listen, whatever it is that I can do as an ally. I'm learning every day, right? New ways of combating my own anti-racist and becoming my own anti-racist person, right?
Both are great. I always, especially when I meet with students who are looking to get more engaged, I always, remind them that they have a voice that they can use, that they can show up. There's every day, I'm in the South Loop, every day I'm hearing a protest or a march going down my street. All of last week, there was people crowded by the Christopher Columbus statue in Grant Park, just waiting trying to show how unhappy they were with that still being there. And I think while some individuals may be scared to get out there, whether it be for COVID reasons or potential violent reasons or police reasons, I think there's opportunity after opportunity, whether at home or outside, to give back and support and volunteer, whether it be at a food bank or at a march. So many organizations on the ground, I think, are out there trying to support this in different ways. So there's avenues to do that. How about books? Someone asked about books about racism. Any recommendations? Or racism, it doesn't necessarily have to be against the Black community, Asian and Latino communities also. If you don't read, it's okay.
No, I'm actually reading or starting a new series, Trauma-Informed Stewardship, and just really, also taking time to reflect as a practitioner, as a legal service practitioner, as somebody who, this is a traumatic time for us too, for what the work that I do, and trying to help understand what my role is as an attorney and helping people through this experience. So that's what I'm reading right now. And I would encourage everybody also, right? This is very hard work. So take care of yourselves as well while you're doing this, whatever that looks like. So I have to step away a little bit from the news and from that. So my reading is a trauma-informed stewardship.
So how else do you take care of yourself? I think that's a great question.
So I have 3 children. I have 3 boys, 9, 7, and 1.5. So a lot of time taking care of myself is spent hanging out with them. Because even though everybody's at home, I'm here or, in front of work and screens. So just really trying to make sure that the weekends are the weekends and, we have off time, we have downtime, we can play some Mario Kart without, worrying about what's going to happen or that our mom has a call or something going on. So, and then I've been trying to take some morning walks by myself, right? Wake up a little bit extra early. I'm sure many of you with children understand what that means right now, to get some quiet time in the house, right? Waking up a little extra early and just taking some time to center myself and get ready for the day, because it's a long day. All of us working in this field, living this experience for Black community members who have been living this for generations, right? Feeling it's a lot.
Definitely, we need you to keep doing this work, so make sure you continue taking care of yourself. Andy, how about you? Books, self-care?
Yeah, there's a lot of great books out there. I think if the question's around specifically around the Asian American experience, I think one of the classics is called Yellow by Frank Wu. I think it's still pretty relevant. The other is The Making of Asian America, or The History. Yes, that's right. I think by Erica Lee. But if you're not a reader, to Ruth's point, PBS right now has online available for free the Asian Americans docuseries. So this is a 5-part, basically retelling of the history of Asian Americans in this country. Some really, really unique, powerful stories in there that I didn't even know about, certainly. And so if you're more a visual person and you like those personal stories, that may be a better way to go to get a better feel for what our experiences have been like and how they maybe connect to yours.
How about self-care?
Self-care. I probably should do what Ruth says and not watch CNN late into the night. I would say this, for as long as it will last, baseball has returned. And so instead of yelling at the TV because I'm watching CNN, I'm usually now yelling at my White Sox because they can't score runs when they have men on base. So, you know, I see a W in the corner there. I'm not going to speak about the Cubs, but the White Sox, you know, it's always good to be able to complain safely about sports, you know, where the stakes are so low.
Thank you both for that. I do have one more question. It's kind of serious. I apologize for having to take it back a little bit. But is it a cop-out to blame colonialism for racism in our own communities? Should we point to ourselves instead of blaming white supremacy? Or do we as minorities lose social capital by admitting that we can be just as racist as white America?
I mean, I think my first reaction would be that, no, I don't think we lose capital. I think you gain in understanding and being honest and being truthful about where you have to start from to dismantle what that looks like. You know, otherwise you are making, you know, not excuses, but explaining it away. And that's, to me, that is the reality of colonialism started this, and being honest that, you know, I don't think it takes away from us, but makes it honest, being honest about the situation.
Yeah, I mean, I would say I would understand that perspective if we were talking about a different country, right? Potentially. It would have to be a really unique situation. But here in America, I mean, our you know, I think we've established our country was founded with white supremacist, you know, ideas and values ingrained in our documents, in our founding documents, right? 3/5, right? That African Americans weren't considered full people, right? Native Americans weren't counted at all, right? And so I think it's impossible in the American context for us not to, you know, just acknowledge and have to deal with white supremacy. You know, are there prejudices in other parts of the world that maybe aren't directly as strongly connected to colonialism? Maybe. I don't want to say that that's impossible, but I think making that argument in America, it's not particularly useful.
And I would agree with you both, but also say that, like, I think we are to blame if we understand that and not take any corrective action.
I think that's right. Yeah. You know, the whole, what's the saying? It is what it is. That's just not going to fly anymore. It is what it is until we make it something else. So I think we need to take that responsibility.
Like, I have family members who say, I'm too old to change. I'm too old to change. I'm like, you're not too old to change. You can do it. Well, thank you both. I mean, I always truly enjoy hearing you both speak. You're so passionate and knowledgeable about a wide array of topics, but this was really illuminating. I just would love to give it back to you if you have any last words to share or thoughts.
You know,
if you don't, it's okay.
I just give another shout out to the census. For those that have not filled out their census, please do so. It's incredibly important. You know, on Friday, for those of you that are in the city of Chicago, our Chinatown partner, along with ICER, will be doing out in Chinatown Plaza from 12 to 4. They're going to be having events. If you like writing chalk on the ground, they'll be writing census messages on the brick plaza on the ground there. You know, they will be socially distancing and masking up for those of you that are interested. But it's just, again, with our Asian legislators on the state level, just trying to reiterate how important it is to reply to the census. It's critical that, you know, all of us, you know, are seen and counted in this moment. So that's just my little plug.
Thank you.
I just remind everybody, if you have an immigration question, please go see an immigration attorney. Do not go to your tax guy. Do not go to a notario. Go see an immigration attorney, please. And vote. So get your request, your mail-in ballot, and make sure that you, if you are able to, please vote in the upcoming elections.
Yes, and please, just my message to everyone is, use all the resources available to you, all three of our organizations, access our websites, see what programs we offer, services we offer. All three are more than willing to connect you if our organizations can't directly assist you as well. There is support. There are resources available to you. You're not alone for any of the issues that you may be facing. Thank you again, both. Such a delight. I'm going to pass it back to our hosts, who I think have some closing remarks. So thank you.
Hey. So I'm just going to throw up a quick resource guide, that will be, if you need the names for any of the organizations that were here, as well as a few that were not here today, but can still assist with a variety of either immigration or healthcare or incarceration, questions that you may have. So. There we go. And then just a couple announcements regarding some upcoming events.
Good evening. My name is Gerald Hankerson. I'm with CAIR-Chicago, and definitely I just want to give great thanks and mad kudos to our panelists and moderator, Ruth, Andy, and Sufyan. And so as Wally just suggested, of course, the hope for each webinar in the 2020 revision series, we want to highlight a few upcoming events that we hope that still really take charge of us being proactive, looking forward to making solutions against the two pandemics that we're currently living in. So one of the upcoming events is actually tomorrow. Is a wonderful short series called Black Men in America, Reimagine, Renew, and Reclaim. So this is one where we bring forth African-American men to share their perspectives on what it is for us to be more united, but also be very much in tune with the experiences that we have so we can move forward in making the most of not just only building up our communities, but making sure that there's better understanding and solidarity with all of our fellow Chicagoans, Illinoisans, Americans. So this upcoming event will feature 3 panelists, including the esteemed Tamil Black, who's this longtime historian, activist here. I think he's like 100, literally. But so just to have that particular stark wisdom, but also the slant toward the other 2 panelists, Combini Daniels and Terrence Pruitt. They both work very strongly with Black youth, particularly Black young males, and really zero in terms of advocacy and education. So this is sponsored by the University of Illinois Chicago, as well as the U of I, University of Illinois Health Office of Community Engagement and Neighborhood Health Partnerships. Not only can you register for it, but this will also be a Facebook live event. So all you have to do is look up the U of I Ocean HP, that whole acronym right there, like their page, and you get to watch it free on Facebook Live. Andy made reference to this second event. So this is, of course, something that all our collective organizations featured here have stressed tonight, and we're going to echo it one more time. The census is important for every community, but many of the communities that are communities of color, underprivileged, underserved, happen to call themselves hard to count, because typically these are communities that are undercounted, and therefore, as Waleed said at the very top, don't have funding for the schools, the hospitals, the road repairs, other federal services, and things that are local. And so this particular focus is aiming at bringing out the Asian American community, which is very much growing and very much present here in Chicagoland and Illinois. So that'll be on this Friday. And if you have any more information, check out the Facebook page. And of course, again, stress to vote come this November. I'm now going to turn it over to my colleague, Chris, for final note.
All right, so I'm Chris. I'm a fellow for the Illinois Muslim Civic Coalition, and I will reiterate and just thank everyone that has been a part of this second episode of this series, and would just like to wish everyone that is celebrating in the next few days, Eid Mubarak, Happy Eid. For those of you that might be confused and go, wait, Eid was so recent ago. Yes, there are two Eids. This one is marking the end of the Hajj, or the pilgrimage that Muslims do to Mecca, the holy city. And so Eid Mubarak. We hope that all of you enjoy the rest of your day and have a great night.